You guys ready?
Yep.
I guess we'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. Time is 7 o'clock, and we are commencing with our public hearing, charter-required public hearing on the proposed ordinances before us this evening. There's 3 of them. Each of them have their own time whereby we'll discuss them, so it's actually on 3 separate hearings this evening. The first one is regarding the proposed new chapter 325 on the illicit discharge and connection stormwater ordinance. It looks like Mr. Kellogg has a presentation for us, so I'll turn the floor over to you for that presentation, and then we'll take comments from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Leo, Mr. Chairman. I'm also joined here tonight for any additional information you may want or testimony from our subject matter expert, our town engineer, Mr. Schatzline, and our latest attorney, Mr. Vin Marino. Just to very briefly give you an overview, I know we've talked about this quite at length, but for the purposes of the public hearing, I want to just make sure we have on the record some of the information on this. Basically, as we've said many times before, there are both federal and state requirements under the MS4, the Small Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4 permit. It's all promulgated under a national program, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit process. We are in many phases of compliance as relates to the MS4 permit, as you're well aware. One of those is the requirement to adopt a local ordinance to meet those programs and that permit requirement. The recommended ordinance has been based upon a model ordinance that was provided by the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. It has been adopted by several municipalities. It has been reviewed by Mr. Schatzline and been further reviewed and revised somewhat by Attorney Marino, particularly as relates to our desire to meet but not exceed the minimum federal and state mandated elements. In essence, the objectives are to regulate the contribution of pollutants to stormwater system, prohibit illicit connections and illegal discharges, and establish a legal authority to inspect, conduct surveillance, and monitoring as required. And as you can see from the ordinance itself, it also provides for the required enforcement and appeals process, which is spelled out in the ordinance, which is basically an appointed enforcement officer and or the ability to utilize the Water Pollution Control Authority as well in that regard. That is the overview. If you like any more further technical information and details, I would hand it off to Mr. Schatzline, or if anyone any legal opinion, Mr. Marino. If not, turn to the public.
Okay. Would any members of any questions from council at this time?
No, just a statement. It's a great job solidifying that to something that's able to be eaten by the town and meeting all the needs, despite keeping it from being onerous. Nice job.
All right. So the purpose of the hearing is to receive input from the public regarding this proposed ordinance. So if there are any members of the public that wish to participate at this time, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Don't all rush up here at once. All right. I see no interested parties at this particular time, although it's fairly early in the process. While we're going, since I'm taking notes, we're just going to take it in roll call for the moment. We have Mr. Condon, Mr. Rooney, Mr. Reed, Mr. O'Rourke, myself, Ms. Martin, and Mr. Rao, Mr. Kellogg, Mr. Schatzline, There's going to be some notes for our clerk to read. Yes, it is.
chance.
All right, we'll just give it a few more minutes, and then we will adjourn this first meeting. Unfortunately, since the meetings are all noticed, we'll have to wait until the notice time for the 7:30 and 7:45 start on the other proposed ordinances. That's true. Yeah, must be the car.
Leave the house and so you go crush the other.
How you feel?
Oh, good, thanks. Much better.
You look a lot better. You don't look like a carny anymore.
Understand what that means?
Carnival worker? Carnival worker. Someone that takes your tickets to get on the loop.
I guess he's trying to stipend him from asking for fun of us.
It looks to me like with an innocent 12-year-old carnival worker, like the ones that they get tickets to go to loop.
Same here too.
No, I called her today, and she was taking a photo shoot.
So they could get, I like the,
I showed back. Yeah. Well, it is. Two shows. Julie is doing well. That's awesome.
She, that Miami place is flying her up to Disney Island next week. She's going to there. She's doing well. Very happy.
Yeah, it's not like she's right in Newtown, so she just hops. Right down the back.
All right, it's now 7:12. We did get started a little late, so we've had 12 minutes for individuals to come forth, and I'll just ask one more time if there's anybody else from the public who wishes to comment or participate in any way regarding the proposed ordinance, Chapter 325, illicit discharge in connection for the stormwater ordinance. Going once, going twice, all right. I see nobody interested in participating, so I will adjourn the meeting at 7:13 p.m. We'll reconvene at 7:30 p.m. Mr. Schatzline, no one's excited to, you have job security, and no one's excited to do your line of work,
Yeah,
or even talk about it.
I'd love to explain it, but I want to do it.
Thanks for coming, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I even put on some flash on my phone and on my, everybody or just you?
There you go. Frank, you only had to
You want
do
to talk about stormwater?
I never some crap on my
Yeah.
phone. I didn't just say.
No? Oh, okay. Oh, you're the clerk.
Running water with your tears when you Frank's notes.
Yes. There I am.
You've got a lot of problems.
Her into the Russians.
I haven't
Oh, no.
even got it.
but they hijacked.
This isn't home?
Even a couple of them.
Yeah, you want the minutes?
Started saying,
Just kidding,
it's called cultural hacking, and what they do is
Just
they,
file it like that.
they get someone, and they start to like, the very key things like,
All right, we have 15.
have they ever been communicated to the person they hijacked? Have they
We have 15 minutes, take your time.
For example,
7:30.
a promotion, or an organizational announcement?
Well, we already adjourned that one.
We already did that one.
Attach their
I want the round
document,
two.
that when you open it up, so they'll like send it out, check this out, and they'll look at it from separate.
You'll be sorry when
I
you
didn't
see
get a
this.
chance to call you back.
So I never open stuff like that.
He writes like a lawyer.
An organization should never send.
So I just wanted to make sure that
For an organizational announcement. There's no reason to just keep it in the email. You can open up an email all you want.
I have a meeting tonight. I couldn't.
We haven't had a full meeting. Because you like to talk. So I'm doing.
So we got a head clear now. It'll take place the same place that,
Really just for Jay-Z.
they pay and you know, whoever's running it, put that announcement poster in there.
It just keeps it a little bit like, no matter what you do, it's-
It's not gonna go by. Double digits. A double digits? So if there's 100 people voting, they'll win 7.
So does that make the argument that the one that
That's gonna become Jesus next year.
convention should have been the one
Then how tonight's
about
debate goes.
Teddy Roosevelt could be in Steph Nelson's position. And he will lose 70.
Nice nail on one, by the way. That was perfect. Stood him up.
So it doesn't matter because he's an outsider, it's just no matter who.
Then you had to get his negative this and later.
Yeah.
Phil the Bubble. Say hi, Bubbles.
Oh, it's not,
So
it
I
can't
tried
be
to
for free
follow
all
the
the time.
ploy with the headquarters, to be able to use So I said, you know, talk to Lou for an hour. So then he says, he says,
give me an hour and then I'll. Screw this. I get in the car. I get in the car.
Good, good for you. Old school.
Yeah, yeah.
okay, right out.
Teddy Claus a cigar. First of all, you have to do small business owners in town shows. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, that's perfect.
Real seriously, show.
There's a full moon, huh?
Yeah, this is okay.
Not much you can do with the full moon, right?
There's a lot of Irish on this day right now.
Well, we need to, as you pointed out, years ago, mix up the demographic a little bit, you know? Scott Allen, Kirk Charge got some thoughts on that.
Do that for anybody else or you?
Remember that one night before it actually.
I mean, if they put it
A picture where it hit, it's like a brick where you said, us right next to them, next to you know how bad that was, especially if there was, you know. And then it's on a picture.
Okay, so
Ian is not here either. Ian's lost in New York. Fine, that's fine.
You should
Do
never.
everything in-
everything that.
I'll list the vacancies we got. Oh, yeah, no, list the vacancies. Who's that? Oh, people.
You see a lot of this now. It's coming out.
That's what they should be doing.
That was the second thing I wanted them to do.
And the one girl who threw that was like Howard tells her. The fear, she threatens it with fears of what happens. And she's very fond of her. And she's well, you guys can clear out bare hands. So you don't think about it. You don't think that. Right. And for all ever. If you were cheating, you never think about it. You may be able to cheat a 0 6 cents a pound.
Oh, absolutely. Right, put my day in the beach.
Ronda Rousey, maybe. Ronda Rousey.
Good loss.
What's the point? So you're like, yeah. You don't she goes, we literally think from the time that's for even when we know you don't know what's going on. Right. Right. So the internet thing, I was learning about it. Right. And becoming desensitized to it. And that's what I said. What we did, which is the next thing. Well, she responded in that way. And she kind. Yeah. Maybe we should have known. Yeah. Well, we did the right thing, right? Feel about face and prove it. Yeah. But it's just that, that visual that you were anticipating. Oh my God, that picture of that when we're all standing up there for the swearing in. Look like your security detail mask. We look like a security detail. We look like,
Mike's good guy.
we look like white soldiers. No doubt.
Oh, he has a word, he called her.
They look like straight out South Africa. They look like 176. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Absolutely.
We'll be happy on this.
Not if we were Warren as that picture was going.
Oh, well,
All right, so you know any gamblers? I get 2 tickets for this bus trip. I can't go. I give them away. I don't need them. Do you want to gamble?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
You know anybody that wants to? Yeah. I stay forward as possible. By the way. Except for the concert, same here. Yeah, except for maybe. I'd rather move like Xfinity. Right. Foxborough. Yeah. Not Foxborough. Oh, Richfield Playoff. Yeah. Richfield Playoff. What's the Toyota Walmart. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think you can see anything at all.
Right.
Figure if I had to, if I wasn't committed, I could kill 5 hours watching a football game. I was up in the evening, something like that.
What about,
MRCC.
the two contracts we have?
Yeah, but he's got 26 people. So half the bus is full. Who is he? Oh, sorry,
Everybody in the
Dennis's
state
son,
does. I'd say nobody has.
Yeah. How does a big team do? You know. Question asked and answered.
Yeah, these guys are.
In this case, these
They're out there, which is good.
That's what, but no.
No, it's never good.
Person should have never agree.
Right, correct.
That's what I'm saying.
But they also know how to really kind of escalate the salary. Big deal. So,
That's why they argue that it's contract if they're taking more money, you know? Like being a baseball player.
Yeah, it's kind of weird not having to go see a game.
no, more for the jump.
Kids or drop kids off. Got that empty. Yes, they're going, right?
They
Yeah,
wouldn't let us drop anything.
yeah, yeah.
Kind of weird.
There's the growing up.
You can't push cars off.
I dread that day, bro.
I did it.
First week is, before it's usually
Yeah. He got this big ass bumper for him.
We don't know any saving graces, so this week was,
And plus, look at me.
towards the end of last week was getting a
You know
little
what I
bit.
mean? It's like,
I know.
oh, like, what is useful?
This week was the first
Push
week.
your car off the road.
I don't know, man, it might have been,
I gotta push
I
mine
don't know what would
yesterday,
happen.
the firehouse.
Cable stay
And I
out
go,
of the house.
in the firehouse when my daughter's driving, just died.
Friday to fix it for
No,
whatever reason.
but now it's like,
In
is it
addition to
bad?
the first week, we figured
Goes for a bit, then stops.
had no, like, even
Kind of
background
helping.
noise to kind of like,
Anyway, we can do full-time conversation, you know?
My brother-in-law,
Hey, how are you? Sorry I missed you yesterday.
and I was at
Good.
the first. And of course,
Well, Bill told me to be there 11, so I was, and nobody was there, so I was like, all right, I'll go, and my car died a couple of times. So,
if he feels emasculated,
it's a Ford,
he's passive aggressive.
a little guy, what the heck is it called?
I did
My wife's Escort.
just think in 6 years, that's what you just said, that's what.
And I did the key trick. The key trick worked, I thought it worked, but then it stalled halfway to Bill's house from my house, then it stopped. Got Lucas to put in the engine, dry stuff, and the cleaner. So I put that in yesterday, let it sit for a while, had it run for a while, to see if that works. But I'd definitely like to know if there's an error code, because it's got 45,000 miles
And
or
here's the
something
real
like that.
kicker, and the garage.
Should be on the warranty, right? Yeah.
So, you know, we've had some quality times for the last
It's
17 years,
17.
supposedly, right? Haven't gotten one text
Yep.
or call
Ford
or
one.
like,
I think it's a four-cylinder Ford.
please
Ford
radio
one.
silence. By the way, I'm happy and no problem at the same time. Happy that, okay, I don't understand if it's going, because it's in the middle of the night.
It's slow. I mean, I've done all sixes and eights.
Face
This
University.
is, push.
So,
Wow,
Yeah.
how's that going?
who the hell knows?
I mean, but you better than like. The city's a lot to chew on.
Oh, yeah. But she was,
Yep, problematic.
she was doing
And it was raining, so I'm like, it's weird, right?
for
So
whatever reason.
I checked the battery, that seemed fine, I was like, is it the alternator?
So she's gonna be one of these birds that flies, you know.
I appreciate
jumps out of
it.
the
Sorry, I
nest
missed you. When are you gonna be back in
right
town?
now.
Good.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
No,
9 times out of 10 you succeed.
yeah,
You don't know unless you try, right?
right.
You know, when if you don't play.
Perfect. I'm at
Kind of afterwards, you know, so hey,
I'm at Whitney Farms at a golf tournament, but I
keep
can
your head on a
be
swivel and,
Or
don't
go to my house.
be afraid to fail, you know,
On shame.
Yeah. Perfect, let me do that.
with the dip.
I'm going somewhere with this. I'll get some.
It's so funny. So,
Perfect.
3 weeks ago,
I appreciate the help.
we should do the steakhouses.
Yeah, he just died. Yeah, no, just dead, like, almost like a security alarm. Just killed the car. And it was literally about a mile from my house. And I pushed it to the fire department, and then I came down, my wife and my daughter, and tried starting it, and it took a while to finally start, but wouldn't grab it. And, knowing the RPMs would really go above 2,000.
Maybe you and I should just do it like that.
Then I finally got it to hold gas, and basically grab enough to go home, and I got it home. No, actually, we had to tow truck towed home. But yesterday, from my house to Bill's, I was about an hour and a half. And as I was driving, it just stopped, but I started right up. And then it was
By the way, the pot's.
It is, like a cut up of gas.
But that's fine.
Yeah, for sure. God, he's so defensive, just.
I just want, you know what it is, I want clarity.
Check it out. Thanks, appreciate it.
Was that a last shot?
Okay.
Okay, can we move on now?
Thanks. Bye.
Jesus, if I stop at every part we talk, I'll never get where to
You're so
go.
funny.
So, we have a friend of ours, I go, I'm not sure.
So that's why.
So that's where we are right now. We got the
So it's the three next. The meat.
Does anybody have a paper clip up here? Just one.
I do not have a paper clip.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
There's a paper.
Look at that. Thank you. You guys are.
See the post headline today, beat the needles. What's the needle?
Answer.
Play off of, Meet the Beatles.
Yes, what's the needle?
Apparently, there's some nonsense that came out with, McCartney and Lennon, some crazy situation that they were in, some post comes out, post comes out with the, beat the Beatles.
Let me tell you, Paul McCartney did great, James Corden, karaoke.
That was great.
Really,
That was awesome.
really good. It was like 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
And he did this performance at the end of the bar. It was great. He's so cool. He gets so much time.
Yeah.
For a guy that could be so like, I don't know, elite. Gives the time.
Sir Paul.
Sir Paul. He did Howard Stern the other week too. It was one of the best things he's ever heard. Really good.
Guys have been around a long time, man. Holy cow. You honestly, like, who are their doctors? Like, you just, I want to know who Keith Richards' doctor is.
He's gotta be on the right.
You know, like, get those notifications, like, you know, social media, so it's my dad, it was like, well, he's,
Right.
so I'm like, okay, just so everybody knows Keith Richards is still alive. It's just like, just as much of a shock as if something.
Hey, man, thanks.
Crazy.
Yeah, so like, hello,
Goes to,
can you hear me?
Dunville's in Westport.
Right.
Like 2 times.
Can you hear me?
Noon.
Hey, I just got the phone with your
Like,
brother.
drives home.
He asked if I could drop the car off at your house tomorrow. I could do that, but I wanted to get your permission first.
Well, how cool is that you could do that, people leave him alone?
No, like, you try to approach
Oh,
him,
perfect.
loses his mind.
Oh,
Yeah, so I think I'll just leave it there with the keys. I gotta do a voting with them tomorrow, so
okay, so he's got
if I
that.
could do that, that'd be great. Thanks, man.
They deal with it. If you're a stranger, you walk up, he just attacks you.
Got it.
Perfect, thanks.
Good title, I guess.
Okay, no problem. Bye.
Dunbills, man, where they have gobbledunks. Gobbledunks. It's this Danish tar. These all these Danes go to Dunbills because they got cases of gobbledunks. It's like cough syrup type of brandy, you know?
Did you see the song I sent you? Did you play it?
No, I was,
Oh my God.
I was on the phone the whole way here and I had macaroni.
Oh my God.
What's the background?
It's just a song about that. It's absolutely hilarious.
Hey, where's up here, Miss Lita?
Okay, but
So you're trying to watch it? Down too. Big concert, big debate tonight.
Yeah, we're out in the line tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on TV though.
No.
I have to talk to you guys quick before we, stream on before council, before the two council, we go in our office.
Flag again? Yeah. Or we got?
Nah, we're not gonna fucking. All right. It's 7:33 PM, so we have two additional public hearings to commence with this evening. The first one, I believe, is on the amendment to Chapter 470, Article 7, which is the relief for veterans and surviving spouses. Again, this is the charter-required public hearing prior to the council's enactment of any proposed legislation. And with that being said, we will have public comment, opportunity for public comment after our presentation by Mr. Kellogg. So, Mr. Kellogg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, as you said, we're here to talk about, there's two tonight. I know at the last council meeting, we kind of presented these together. We will be presenting these separately for each public hearing. Before I begin, I would like to, again, introduce and ask him to introduce himself for the record. A Massac High School student who I was honored to have who came to me asking to work on his capstone project for high school with me in Town Hall. Aaron, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Aaron Squibb of 3100 Ridge Road, and I'm a senior at Massac High School. And I reached out to Mr. Kellogg hoping to do something in government for capstone, and together we came up with this project, which I think has been a great learning experience.
Thanks, Aaron. So the first, we're going to talk about the first public hearing, well, actually the second tonight, but the first for veterans tax relief is for the amendment, as you said, to Chapter 470, Article 7. As you know, we have a base veterans tax relief program. There are lots of nuances as relate to all these programs, as you are well aware. I want to also thank and acknowledge our assessor, Justin Feldman, who is here tonight and certainly available for any technical assistance or information he can offer. He was also instrumental in putting this together. We were evaluating both the state and local options. The state options are somewhat broader in terms of there are less restrictions on who can obtain them. However, when you get to the local options, there are limits as relates to income. And there are some nuances in the amounts in each, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. We adopted our local option in January 2003, and one of the things that was important to me was that we revisit this, which is why I've recommended that this council evaluate and adopt the change in legislation. And as I'll ask Aaron to talk about a little bit further, is the results of the research that he did and came back to me and Justin to discuss, and our recommendations going forward based upon where we are relative to other towns, which is slightly lower overall in the benefit that we provide. So, Aaron, you want to talk about that?
So when I began looking at what other towns offer to the veterans living in their communities in terms of the state and local options, it came to my attention that, as you can see in the far left column, Monroe's is significantly lower than many of the other towns around us. The reason for this is the state passed a law that states when the town's grand list doubles, the amount off the assessed value also doubles. But for Monroe, our grand list doubled actually slightly before that state law was implemented. So our amount was never actually doubled, even though our grand list doubled. So because of that, our amount is lower than all the other towns, which you can see most of which have doubled. So to make up for this, we looked at the local option that Monroe offers, which is currently higher than some of the other towns. But in total, Monroe offers about $8,000 off of the assessed property tax value. And we wanted to increase this to kind of be in the median range compared to other towns around us. So to do so, we propose to increase the town's local option by $2,000 off of the assessed value. And by doing so, we'll increase the property tax exemption for about 100 veterans who are currently on this program in this town. And I just want to go to there we go. And as you can see, Monroe's local option is currently $5,000. We're proposing to increase it to $7,000, which will make the total about $10,000, which puts us kind of in the median range for similar sized communities in the neighboring area. So in total, in terms of monetary value, this will cost the town about $7,500 within the budget, which is a slight increase compared to what we used to have.
So we did, as we mentioned at the last council meeting, Aaron and I did present this to the Board of Finance. It was received well, and we received their consensus to proceed as well. As you know, the adjustments for these programs is calculated in the mill rate calculation. So it's something that they felt very comfortable that they could absorb this with a really negligible impact to the mill rate. It would have no impact to the mill rate at this level. So this $7,500 is based upon our current mill rate, and as Aaron said, it would affect currently 107 veterans that are on this program. I believe that is our entire presentation. Yep, that is the next one. So if there's any questions for myself or Aaron or Justin, I'd be happy to entertain. If not, turn the floor back over for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Mr. Squibb, fabulous job. Ms. Martin has a question up here.
I do, yeah. What was the number now receiving benefits, 170?
107 under this,
107.
the local, specifically for the local option, correct, Justin?
Okay.
There may be more that are receiving just the base state benefit, which does not have an income limitation, correct? Yeah.
Thank you.
Any members of council have any questions or comments?
Good job.
All right, seeing none, at this time, I'll ask the members of the public for comment. Would any members of the public wish to come forward and comment regarding this proposed ordinance?
There we go. Dad.
Thank you, sir.
Michael Sand, 3100 Ridge Road. I'm one of Monroe's roughly 100, I guess, veterans. My father was a veteran. My son is currently serving. And I'll make the observation that governments in general, from municipal on through the federal government, do a lot of flag waving around how much they value veterans, but do very little for them. So I would just say hats off to you guys for making this happen. I think there are a lot of veterans out there that every little bit helps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance? All right, seeing none, I will close this public hearing. The time is 7:40 p.m. We will be adjourned for 5 minutes, and we will have the last public hearing at 7:45 as noticed.
What branch of service?
U.S. Army Special Forces.
U.S. Army? Baby.
Your son? Where's your
My
son?
son is Army too. He's an EOD guy. He's currently in the U.S. Army's counter IED officer at the United Nations.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your service.
Yeah.
Someone was asking me a question the other day about, was something that we did to matter of FOP. I have no idea, I don't remember.
Right.
I honestly don't even remember. I actually didn't remember what my animal was. I think it was a 71 Bravo. I think it was a 71 Bravo, executive officer. Automatically, I think it was, and I tried to look it up, and you can't really find it. There's some obvious, probably like there is some others, but I just couldn't remember. Oh my God.
I can imagine being on the bridge of a ship right now.
My uncle was Navy. He's got some crazy stories. My good friend Stone,
Not individually.
it's his 4 tours in Iraq.
Yeah,
It's pretty high rank.
Yep.
It's pretty way up there. Well, last time I talked to him, he was Jordan.
What's the name of Bob's name with the current rotations? Those guys are doing way too many of them.
Yeah, he did a lot.
They're doing more than World War II guys.
He's 40 years old, they still, because he's his rank, he still goes and trains. He doesn't do as much as he used to, but he's doing a lot of the training of the Middle East National Police Force stuff.
Those multiple tours, man.
Yeah, no, he was,
And he's just got a rise to it.
so it's quite big, so he was supposed to be the first.
Right. That's the point. Right. And I'm saying on the left.
No, no, no.
Right. Yes, complete mess, yeah.
It's like he was, I think they were, he was officially active for a long period of time, like years.
Right.
Because they didn't really count that, plenty of that callback, you know? And then sent him in again, he's like, I was, there's issues over there, but it's just nuts, they can't hold that double, every day, I don't know.
No. No, the rotation is crazy. Yeah. It's not bad already, that's for sure. Right. But in many, after the age, still doing Navy reserves, which is classic 2 weeks a year, you never, no, remotely wherever they get called up there. Because he was a triathlete, and he did Navy intelligence, that was his special thing. They called him up, stuff like a SEAL team. They did 2 tours, 3 kids at home.
Oh, that's, I mean, that, Jay, he's 42. He just went. I don't know if he's going this year, I would have known, I think he went into last year. Last year, he's like, you know, bang, go, he said it's a lot easier now for him because of his ranks. So that's why he's actually doing, you know, he's like, that's all Sydney's the whole time. That's, he actually called me. He's like, I'm not playing.
Just happened. Yeah, well, this guy didn't have a high rank, man. He was, you know, not doing SEAL stuff, but just supporting him.
Yeah.
But he was way too close to the.
Yeah, that's what he said. That's what he said. He's like, yeah, we'll go out there. He's still.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You're right on the point.
And he said it actually got worse in the city. Actually, maybe not college, but that's worse.
Well, what this guy was telling me was really loud, man, to be honest with you. He says, we're supposed to be secure. He says, by the way, no guns, no weapons, everything's outlawed. We've been killing each other with bare hands and improvised.
That's the same thing he's doing.
He said, the lid is barely on the pressure cooker.
If it's not going to be raining.
He's like, oh, a couple of weeks, I'll get out there. I get that. Right. Can we raise it?
Yes.
All right, time is 7:45. We are going to commence with the last of our public hearings this evening, which is the public hearing regarding the supplement to Chapter 470, new Article 10, exemption for Gold Star parents and spouses. To kick off the meeting, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Mr. Kellogg, for presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and once again, I want to introduce Aaron Squibb.
Hello, Aaron Squibb, 3100 Ridge Road.
Again, Aaron, a student, for the purpose of the public hearing, a student at Massac who's working on this with me as part of his capstone project. Also want to acknowledge our assessor, Justin Feldman. When I first had mentioned to Justin that at some point I wanted to look at Veterans Tax Relief Program in town, and one of the first things he said is there's something new that I think we need to look at. So I want to acknowledge and thank him for pointing this out to us. So this was a new opportunity that came into effect, and this was something that Aaron and I and Justin talked about at length, and Aaron, why don't you walk us through it?
So, as Mr. Sands stated in the previous public hearing, as leaders in our community, we owe it to the citizens of our communities who have risked their lives to defend our country, to do whatever we can in our power to recognize that and honor their service. So when Mr. Kellogg presented me with this idea for my capstone project, I was equally as excited as I believe he was to kind of work on this and see if we could actually implement it in our town here. So basically, first of all, what a Gold Star family is the surviving parents or spouse of a service member who was killed in action during wartime. So what this ordinance plans to do is offer another tax benefit to these families who have unfortunately lost a member during wartime. So this was created by the state on October 1st, 2017, and many municipalities around us have already implemented it, including Milford, Middletown, Bethany, and Durham, whom we have based our proposed ordinance off of. So basically, what the Gold Star ordinance allows families to, these families to do, or 10%, whichever is lesser, exempted from their assessed property value. Through doing research and comparing our town to other towns, we assume that 3 families in Monroe would qualify for this exemption. It's kind of hard to tell because many families aren't forthcoming with this information, but some similar sized towns such as Bethany and Durham have 2 families, so we assume the most we would have is 3. So translating this into a dollar amount, that is a $700 reduction in dollars per family times 3 would be $2,100, we believe the total cost of this program would be.
Just another footnote, I'll mention that under the state statute, there are some income limitations for this program as well. They are not as low as the circuit breaker program. It's I believe it's the circuit breaker program plus, I want to say $25,000 in addition initial income. So families do have to meet income limitations, but they are not as low as the circuit breaker program. And once again, we did the financial analysis based on our assumptions, and it is extremely small compared to the relative sacrifice that these people have made. That real quick?
Yeah, just pointing out the numbers that I just stated. So assuming every family that qualified for this took the maximum $20,000 off their total assessed value, that would be $60,000 off of assessed value total for the town, equating to $22,114. Combined with the other veterans exemption, which we had mentioned in the previous public hearing, the total cost for both of these amendments would be $32,000. We assume at most for the town of Monroe. And I also just want to clarify that to qualify or to apply for this exemption, a family has to submit a form DD form 214 with the town clerk, basically proving that their loved one was actually assumed dead in action. So there are steps to making sure that this program is not taken advantage of, and we hope it'll help as many people as possible.
Thanks, Aaron. So we talked about a couple different numbers, the total dollars versus the total, the delta of increase. So just to be clear, the 2 programs together, the total increase that would affect the mill rate calculation is under $10,000 if you adjust the delta. So still relatively small impact to our overall mill rate calculation. And you know, as I said at the last hearing, just to echo what I said earlier, this, you know, I think, you know, as a community, this is the least we can do as a community for these families. Again, we're happy to entertain any questions. If not, we'll turn it back over to you for public input.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg, Mr. Squibb, Mr. Feldman. Thank you for your hard work. Mr. Mauer?
Just one question, doesn't change my opinion on it at all, but just for information purposes, could a family that qualified for both apply for both?
Yes.
And
Yeah, they're two separate entities pretty much, and you can apply for both.
thank you.
Any other members of council have comments or questions regarding this?
Yeah, I'd say something.
Mr.
Mr. Squibb, you're an impressive young man. Your thoroughness with this is surprising at your age. And I know that Ken helped you with this, but I firmly believe you could have done this on your own. But it's excellent. In regards to what Mr. Sand said, you know, we do wave a lot of flags and we don't act on this. And it's nice to be part of a town that has. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Reed?
I echo as well. You heard my comments the last time. I am going to add, though, a little bit about the capstone. Mr. de Blasi, a friend of the program as well, someone I think a lot of us know is a judge for that program, at least he has been in the past. I learned exactly what that was. I think it's a great idea. I think the capstone's fantastic. But the comments I'd like to make about specifically your involvement in this is truly what a capstone project should be. They shouldn't be this sort of like erroneous, you know, like they don't have, this has actual results that you can measure and you can take with you where you go. And you know, you should market that back at NASIC and say, this is the ideal capstone project, so fantastic job.
Thank you. Definitely marketing out my college resume.
Oh, without a doubt. If you need any references, let any of the analysts know, and we'll be happy to.
Appreciate you saying that, Mr. Reed. We talked early on of, I didn't want this just to be a, follow me around in meetings type of a program. That's not what this is about. We need to actually accomplish something, so.
Yeah, kudos to you too, Mr. Keller. It's a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other praise or comments from town council members?
Excellent job by the other.
Members of the public, would any members of the public wish to comment on this proposed ordinance? All right, seeing none, time is 7:55. I will adjourn this public hearing. We have 5 minutes until the start of our regular town council meeting at 8 p.m. Thank you very much, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
My notes are who was here,
Can you read that?
that there were 0 participants, and Ken gave a presentation, and no one spoke, despite me begging everybody to speak. Running around the parking lot, seeking people to speak, and at 7:13, so you need to start at 7:05, we ended at 7:13, nothing happened.
Actually, 8 minutes of that was just sitting.
I grabbed the police radio, at which time. What's that?
You know,
Yeah.
those black and white Nike ads like they just do, there's a whole bunch of.
Yeah, yeah.
This one's stupid.
It was the wastewater.
This is discharge.
Yes.
That's for, yeah, that's for the regular meeting.
Since there was no real discussion on illicit discharge and stormwater. Where was the traffic?
I was in Darien.
Okay.
I left at 4 o'clock.
Seriously?
And I went from
Were you on the Merritt or 95?
95, got off, got back on. Then they took me some other through town, through Westport. And I wound up getting back on 95.
Something, I can't find it now because
I never come in my work never. My equipment's in the car. I have to run and see my kids.
Okay. Dozens of dirt bikes, quads, and motorcycles frightened drivers on and off 95 stretch.
There was on Route 8, traffic pretty much stopped around exit 12 at about, keep in mind, coming from south to north.
Right.
And around 13-ish, I saw in the other direction, fire department, ambulances, the whole thing on the motorcycle itself stopped dead.
It says,
Don't realize when there's rain on the road, slow down.
well, it says a large group of dirt bikes, quads, and motorcycle riders have been hassling and scaring drivers on 95.
Oh, yeah. We're driving on 95. And they were doing it. My house too. And my son actually took it.
That's different, that brings stuff like that, talking about the growers.
Well, they did
Like
have,
it's fuzzy.
that veterans motorcycle thing, but that wasn't on the highway.
No, this was definitely on the highway, and they were doing the wheelies and everything.
Motorcycles scare me anyway. Just personally scare me.
This is gonna be amended.
Is that where we're going to be bringing in some ones about
So before we do the bond meeting, basically, we just have to say adoption of, and then call for town meetings, there needs to be 2 votes on each one. It's gonna be, he's gonna go away, it's gonna be F, G, H, I, J, K, L, so yeah. I want you to look at me with your eyes crossed.
I would never do that.
Oh, I've seen that look a million
I
times.
was gonna say, yeah, we have to.
For me,
You generally look at me and then I have to look away, and then you look at Dee Dee or Enid or Sean, looking for
For help.
help to smack me or something, right?
What is he talking
Can you
about?
hit him?
there have been times that I'm like, what the heck is he talking about?
That's how we talk sometimes.
Oh my God. Oh, Scotty.
I noticed that.
You on the road or you been home?
Did you notice when you did it?
Yeah. I
Really?
can't believe you wrote that up.
I didn't pick that up at all.
Scotty.
Except for- So you post the houses?
You put a lot of that in.
You fixed it.
Scotty.
Day and night difference.
Sure.
The good thing was that I was in Michigan early.
Okay.
Yeah.
What not roughly 2
And I went, I grew up in a church.
A little bit wetter.
It's a work in progress.
I got up to Huron, I got up to Superior. But what a trip. I was getting paid for it too. It's worth it.
My summer vacation.
Very nice.
Every kid got to
That's the Valentine's brought in you. Great. That's great.
my parents' house. Right now, Lake Michigan,
Those work carriers are always amazing, 1,000 feet, no room to maneuver, and how they were able to.
I never had it.
You get a lot of details.
It's amazing, and the longevity of those ships, it's all fresh water, it's no degradation, except the can of work, it's been nice. That salt water just takes so much out of it. Well, being a blue water sailor, as they say, versus a lake sailor, the lakes are far more dangerous because there's no way.
4 feet of water. 4 to 13.
Waves come up, the size of your bowl, just like a bowl, you have to have a.
4 to 13.
I'm always going to eat.
Okay.
They said there's
Now I
It's much more dangerous.
I'm ready. I'm ready because I
Eight.
didn't eat the aluminum stuff for
Talking
last.
about 13 feet.
We didn't have that.
That's tsunami.
I mean, I could defer to Dennis if more. Dennis wants to talk.
My relative did that.
Now, what did you, what was the officer or something?
That's why I have 1 point. before we.
Yes. Mr. Mauer, are you ready? All right.
That's the other one.
Oh, I'm not gonna.
All right, would you all please rise and join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, today is Wednesday, September 12th, 2018. It is our regular meeting of Town Council, which was postponed from Monday due to the Jewish holiday. For roll call, all members of council except Ms. Aguilar, who is at a prior engagement because we scheduled this meeting on the same evening as back to school night at Massac, and Ms. Lapellis, who also had a pre-planned trip, are absent this evening. Mr. Kellogg is present. The first matter of business that we have is the KERMA member equity distribution check presentation. So, Mr. Kellogg, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to introduce Colleen White from KERMA, who has like to give us a little bit of a presentation, which I think you will find very agreeable.
Very good news. So yeah, my name is Colleen White. I'm a senior underwriter at KERMA, and I'm happy to be able to announce that the town and the Board of Ed is getting a member equity distribution check in the amount of $64,853. There's a 3-year eligibility timeline in order to be eligible to receive this check. So it was a $5 million distribution, which was approved by our board of directors at the end of June. The $5 million comes out of the KERMA 16-17 audited financials. And the 3-year timeline, you needed to be a member during that year. The year it was declared, which was the 17-18 policy year, and then upon the renewal, we distribute the checks. Since 2011, KERMA's been able to do this, and we've given back over $25 million back to our membership. Monroe, I just did a tabulation myself, and we've given back $297,000.
Awesome.
Yeah, that being said, though, it's because of you and being members and committed and loyal to our program, so I really, really appreciate that. Right now, KERMA's assets are a little over $400 million, and the member equity surplus is a little over $140 million, and our gross written premiums are up to $97 million. Monroe is actually participating in a 3-year rate agreement, which is great, so you have stable rates. Again, I'm just here really to say thank you, and I hope you do some good things with the money.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Age, yeah.
Thank you.
You did.
Can you take a picture?
Do you want a picture?
Bob?
Sure. Colleen, you want to do a picture for our local?
Sure.
We can always have Attorney Hayden take his iPhone out as well, and he takes wonderful
I thought he
pictures.
was just gonna take a picture of the
He's
check
got
and
an
submit it.
iPad.
Well, no, she's got it, the handout's got to be, there we go. So she should be in it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah. Right?
yeah,
What are you, best boy or?
He's the director. He's the director.
photo director.
Maybe I could do most of my day. It's true.
Creepy guy in the background.
Another selfie.
All right.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will.
All right, thank you, Colleen.
Thank you.
Mr. Kellogg, are we prepared to make a motion regarding the executive session
Let
this
me-
time, or should we just table that for a moment? And-
There's one individual I did not see in the audience. Let
Right.
me check. It'll take me 30 seconds.
All right, I'm going to move on to the consent calendar. Any comments objections or otherwise to the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, I'll pass the consent calendar as printed. Communications, we have A through N. Absent any objection, I'll ask that those be incorporated into the minutes of this meeting. Seeing none, I'll ask that the clerk please include that. Moving on to public participation. Are there any members of the public present who wish to participate at this time? All right, seeing none, I will close the first session of public participation. And we'll move on to appointments. We have 5 of them, and we'll start with A, Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Raymond Giovanni of 22 Carmen Lane to the Economic Development Commission for a term ending January 31st, 2021.
Motion by Mr. Rooney, is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. Discussion, Mr. Rooney.
Raymond Giovanni has lived in Monroe with his family for 25 years. He served in a leadership role with the Swim Across the Sound. Mr. Giovanni has been employed for 35 years by Union Savings Bank in Monroe. He is also the current president of the Monroe Chamber of Commerce and has volunteered his time in the capacity for the past 20 years. Mr. Giovanni believes his background could help move the EDC in a positive direction. This appointment fills the vacancy created by Michael Benedetto.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Positive direction.
All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And against, that motion carries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0. Item B, Nicole Lupo. Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Nicole Lupo of 11 Hawley Lane to the Economic Development Commission for a term ending January 31st, 2022.
Motion by Mr. Rooney, is there a second? Second by Mr. Reed. Discussion, Mr. Rooney.
Nicole Lupo has lived in Monroe with her family for 14 years. She is currently working under the employment of Connecticut. Ms. Lupo has also served on the board for AYSO over the last 2 years, along with Stephanie PTO. She believes her organizational skills can be useful in helping EDC thrive.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Further discussion?
This appointment fills the vacancy created by Susan Maurizio Cristiano. I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Just a
Ms.
quick
Martin.
question.
Sure.
Didn't we put Nicole on something just recently?
We did. We
And-
did. She was on the Board of Ethics. She has since resigned to make the
Okay.
move to EDC.
All right, thank you.
Good question.
Thought I heard the name.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Against, motion carries 7-0. Item C, Mr. Rooney, Michael Vitello.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Nicole Lupo is here, if we can
Oh.
swear her in. Sure. That would
Ms.
be
Lupo,
great.
if you'd come forward.
Come on down, Nicole. You've done this before. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that you will faithfully discharge according to law your duties as a member of the Economic Development Commission to the best of your abilities, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Congratulations.
It's the package. I swear you could put it on last, but you
Okay, Mr. Rooney, item C, Michael Vitello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Michael Vitello of 30 Hearthstone Road to the Economic Development Commission for a term ending January 31st, 2020.
Motion by Mr. Rooney, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Condon. Discussion, Mr. Rooney.
Michael Vitello has lived in Monroe with his family for 60 years. He is a self-employed construction consultant. Mr. Vitello currently serves the town on the EMS Building Committee. He served on the Architecture Review Board in the past and worked on the EMS Facility Work Group. Mr. Vitello is a strong supporter of economic growth in Monroe and believes his background will serve as an asset to the EDC. This appointment fills the vacancy created by Donna Verdasco.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Any further discussion?
I've worked with him on the economic, on the emergency services thing, and he is going to be a great asset for us. His construction background and knowledge of the construction world is fantastic, so
Thank
looking
you.
forward to him.
Thank you, Mr. Condon. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, motion carries 7-0. Item D, Donna Lynn Wales. Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Donalyn Wales, 205 Old Newtown Road, to the Conservation and Water Resources Commission for a term ending December 5th, 2021.
Motion by Mr. Rooney. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. Discussion, Mr. Rooney.
Donaldin Wales has lived in Monroe for 59 years. She's an active member of the community with professional work experience in the pharmaceutical industry. Ms. Wales has volunteered in the planning and organization of our Memorial Day Parade. She's looking forward to being an integral part of the Conservation and Water Resources Commission. This appointment fills the vacancy created by Ellie Crevelin.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Against, motion carries 7-0. The last appointment, Mr. Rooney, is Dominic Smirgalino. Floor is yours, Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Dominic Smirgalino of 14 Jockey Hollow Road to the Zoning Board of Appeals as an alternate for a term ending October 10th, 2021.
Motion by Mr. Rooney. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mauer. Discussion, Mr. Rooney.
Dominic Smirgalino has lived in Monroe his entire life. He's an active volunteer and coach with AYF football in town. Mr. Smirgalino has also volunteered his time with AYSO and Monroe Little League. He is currently employed by Frontier Communications. Mr. Smirgalino also has a construction background, which he believes will serve him well on the Zoning Board of Appeals as an alternate. This appointment fills the vacancy created by Ryan Condon.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor and against, that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Good job, good work.
You ready?
We are.
Yes.
Executive session?
Yes.
Okay. All right. At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to go into executive session to discuss strategy and negotiations with respect to pending litigation. And I would like to invite into that meeting Ms. Lombardi, Mr. Kellogg, and Attorney Ryan. Does that cover everybody, Mr. Kellogg?
Yes, it does.
Okay. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mauer. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those in favor, show of hands, please. And against, motion carries 7-0. Everybody knows that we have veterans in the crowd this evening.
Lee, would you mind hitting the door for me?
Thank you.
Do we need to?
Do we, Mr. Kellogg, Mr. Reed, can someone turn off this
You got it, Ken?
technologically advanced?
Hello.
Thank you. Forget about that one. It's much easier, the old-fashioned Christian.
Did you have fun without us?
We did, we missed you. So
Tons.
We talked about you while you were gone. Sorry.
Okay, we are out of executive session. We're going to continue with our agenda. We were on action items. On A is the Committee on Finance, Education, Health, and Public Safety. Mr. Rooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have not met since last council.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. B is Planning and Zoning, Public Works, and Park and Recreation. That's Mrs. Lapellis' subcommittee. I do not have a written report from them. I'm not sure if they met.
They have not met.
They have not
They
met.
postponed, Park and Rec postponed their meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martin. So move on to L and A, Mr. Reed.
Mr. Chairman, we have not met since the last meeting.
Thank you. D, Strategic Planning, Mr. Condon.
Strategic planning had some meetings, but we haven't had a formal meeting. We will have one next week.
Great, thank you. EMS, Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have not met since last council.
Mr. Condon, Fire Services.
We have not met.
Mr. Selectman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have not met.
I have not met with myself. I have met with myself. The written report, I believe, is on the dais for you. A few things I want to just highlight. One is that, once again, our finance department was recognized for excellence in the comprehensive annual financial report, receiving an award from the Government Finance Officers Association, and my hat's off again to Finance Director Ron Bonowski and Deputy Director Heidi Mead for their efforts in that regard. On the second note, it's sad to announce that Barb Yeager, our Director of Community and Social Services, has made a decision to relocate out of state to Maine with family, and will be leaving the position the end of this month. She has obviously worked here for an incredibly long time, since 2008 being the director, and has expanded certainly a lot of areas such as Project Warmth and senior transportation and lots of efforts with our food pantry. And we're certainly grateful for all the accomplishments and wish her success going forward. And we are actively working to fill the role. Last was the discount prescription cards. I believe I left some cards on the dais for you, just so, I mean, certainly you can utilize them, but I wanted you to be aware of them. This is a program through the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. It does not cost the town anything additional to participating in this. It allows any Monroe resident to utilize a card at any accepting pharmacy. Most of the national chains will accept it for things that perhaps you don't have insurance for, or pet medications that would be filled at a retail pharmacy. It's also going to be used for other services as well, such as eye and hearing aids and things like that. So I just wanted to relaunch the program so that people can get cards. There are cards available here at the library, at the senior center, in my office, and they can also be printed out online as well. And anyone with an existing card can continue to use that card. You don't need to get a new one if you have one already. And although it's not on my written report, I did want to note I left a copy of the Bridgeport Regional Business Council's new magazine that they launched this year, Region, and I would just call your attention to page 17 at some point when you have time. They did a piece on all the communities, and we have a nice piece from Monroe highlighting one of our recent ribbon cuttings as well. So that is all.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg.
Picture. Lee, look, see you right there. Lee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kellogg. We're going to move on to, Mr. Mauer, yes.
I just wanted to take a moment to, even though she's not here, thank Barb Yeager for her service. I personally was able to work very closely with her during my time on the Commission on Aging, and I know the amount of work that she has put in for this community and the many things that she has done for tons of different services for the members of our town. So I think I speak to council in our thanks for all of her service, and she will be very much missed in her position.
Thank you, Mr. Mauer.
Absolutely.
Anything else? All right, thank you. Mr. Reed?
Yeah, just I echo what Mr. Mauer is saying. She really was selfless in that role. She's fantastic. I know I was her neighbor. I still am her neighbor until she goes to Maine, but you know, she's rarely there. She's always kind of working, carting people around and figuring out how to get things done over there. And it's not easy, right? It's a fairly complex job, and it needs to be selfless, a person in it. So hopefully the next person we get in there is half as good as Mrs. Yeager. So
thank you, Mr. Reed. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. There is no unfinished business this evening. We have a number of items of new business. Before we begin, I just would ask for a motion to amend the agenda as follows. If you, the bullet points under item E, I would like to make each of the bullet points read as follows. So there will be an adoption of the motion for adoption for the appropriation and bond authorization, and then a sub, that would be E, and then F would be a call for a town meeting as it was presented. So there would be 2 votes on each of the proposed bonds, 1 to adopt the bond resolution and 1 to call for a town meeting. So we'll have E will be stricken, and we'll have the first bullet point will be E and F, the second G and H, the third I and T, the fourth K and L, and then the legal counsel retention would become M. Is that clear enough, everybody to follow?
So moved.
Yes.
Yes.
So motion by Mr. Reed, second by Mr. Condon. Any discussion on what I just said? Thank you very much. All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. All right, so let's move on to item A is the proposed new Chapter 325 illicit discharge and connection stormwater ordinance. So may I have a motion that the town council adopt and approve the Town of Monroe illicit discharge and connection stormwater ordinance codified as Chapter 325.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Rooney, second by Mr. Condon. For discussion purposes, briefly, as you know, we've discussed this pretty much at length, ad nauseum. We had a full discussion on this previously. Our town attorney, or appointed counsel on this, Attorney Marino, was present for questions. Both the L&A discussion, our last town council meeting, and we had a presentation at our public hearing as required by our charter prior to the adoption of ordinances this evening. So we've had all those discussions. Mr. Kellogg, if you want to add anything to the discussions, you don't have to, don't feel compelled to, but if you want to.
I think we've pretty much covered all the points. So unless there are questions, I think I'm good.
Didn't want to preclude you. Thank you for that. Any further comments or discussion from any members of council? All right. We have before us the final proposed ordinance. So if there's no further discussion, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor and against, the motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. Moving on to item B, is the proposed amendment to chapter, thank you, Attorney Marino.
Thank you.
Proposed amendment to chapter 470, article 7, relief for veterans and surviving spouses. May I have a motion to adopt and approve this proposed amendment to chapter 470, article 7, which is entitled Relief for Veterans and Surviving Spouses.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mauer, is there a second? Second by Mr. Rooney. Same discussion, we've had a number of, the final stamp of approval vote. Mr. Kellogg, any further comments?
Not at this time.
Any further discussion or comments from any members of council? Mr. Squibb is still here. This is his last opportunity to hear some wonderful comments on this. Anybody? No, I'm kidding.
Thank
you. More praise for Mr. Squibb? No? All right. Excellent job. You've seen it through almost. You have to now encourage the selectmen not to veto your hard work. That's part of the process, right? That's his right.
Can you imagine it? Can you imagine? That'd be great.
Big rubber stamp.
That would be truly what, see the full thing.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor and against, motion carries 7-0. Item C is the proposed supplement to chapter 470, adding article 10, which is the exemption for Gold Star parents and spouses. So may I have a motion to adopt chapter 470, supplemented article 10, as printed?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Reed. Again, for discussion purposes, I'll give you the opportunity. Mr. Kellogg, anything further?
Not specifically on this, however, I just wanted to make one note that obviously my intention is to sign all of these ordinances subsequent to this meeting and transmit them to the town clerk for publication. I just want to make a note that under our charter, as you know, the ordinances will become implemented 30 days after publication by the town clerk, subsequent to my signature. And I just want to make note that both of these veterans relief efforts, by that timing, will become law in Monroe just a mere weeks prior to Veterans Day 2018.
I knew I would extract some comment from you, Mr. Kellogg. Thank you
Didn't
very
want
much.
to disappoint.
Any further comments?
No.
All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor and against, the motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item D. Mr. Squibb, great job. You're almost there.
Mr. Squibb.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item D is our fiscal year 2019 Southwestern Connecticut Agency on Aging Senior Transportation Grant Award Contract. So may I have a motion to approve the following resolution? Resolved that Kenneth M. Kellogg, the Selectman of the Town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the Town of Monroe the Older Americans Act Title III Award Fiscal Year 2019 contract and any associated documents by and between the Southwestern Connecticut Agency on Aging for elderly and disabled transportation services for residents of Monroe.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mauer, is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. For discussion, I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Kellogg, but this is something that looks familiar to members of council that we typically
Yes.
get on a regular basis, so
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the grant that we utilize routinely, so nothing new in that regard. I will just note that we not only utilize this grant, we rely heavily upon it. The transportation coordinator and associated costs are paid out of that grant, so this is something that is truly very important to our senior population that utilize our transportation services, and we could not do it to the extent that we do without the services under this grant. You have a a memo of opinion from our town attorney in this regard. I would ask that you proceed favorably.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any further discussion, Mr. Mauer?
I know that the Commission on Aging is very much behind this grant. The members of the Commission on Aging have discussed transportation on a regular basis, and any services that can be offered to the seniors for transportation is greatly appreciated within that community as well as within the rest of the community. So I know the Commission on Aging is well behind this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mauer. Any further discussion, comment? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor and against, motion carries 7-0. We're now operating in amended territory here. So our first item will be the actual consideration for adoption of the appropriation and bond authorization of $1,018,000 for a road construction and reconstruction Phase 6 project. I know Mr. Kellogg has a presentation for us on all the resolutions. Mr. Kellogg, is that what it is? Is it?
Yes, I do.
All right, so do you want to go through them together in advance, and then we can?
I could certainly do that. They are kind of in order of this as well, so we could pause at any point if you want to consider.
So why don't we just go through them one at a time, if you don't mind, and the floor is yours for now.
Not at all. So I'll just preface, for the purposes of all of them, I'll preface that, as you know, the capital budget for the current fiscal year was included in our annual town budget, which was passed at a referendum in April. The reason why I'm before you here tonight is that certain projects are ready to proceed either immediately or in the near future, and we want, obviously, just to proceed with bonding authorizations so we can move these projects forward. The first one is the road construction and reconstruction bonding. We call it Phase 6. It's simply the sixth package. That bonding package has been put before the town. This is the same bonding appropriation as last fiscal year. It is designed, obviously, to continue to improve our pavement condition index. You're, I'm sure, familiar with that objective ratings system that was utilized by our vendor that has driven our ability to rank and prioritize how we approach our road work. We want to continue to pave and restore the town-maintained roads and address the backlog of the cost of repairs so we can continue to work towards more routine maintenance. Again, we continue to address miles, 3 to 4 miles of not just paving but also drainage, which can get very costly. But as you know, it doesn't make sense to reconstruct and pave a road only to have to rip it up if you have drainage issues underneath. So that is the process that we use going forward. Another thing that we will do this year is continue to we're going to continue based upon the townwide PCI, but we are also going to look to do a reassessment as well this year, so we can look back at all the years that have transpired since that initial scoring was done and do a new assessment. That's not part of the bonding, but I just want to think it was an important note to say that we're at a point in time where we need to kind of assess where we are, and this is the right time to do that. This is simply just to articulate that. As in the last budget presentation, I mentioned how our road work is done through a combination of operating expense in the budget, bonding, and the town-aid road grant. And the point here is that we are looking to match the same bonding levels that we did last year. That is what was in our budget, and we, as you'll see in the very bottom, that will allow us to continue to make the same kind of level appropriation that we did last year, which we think is necessary to keep going in the right direction. Mr. Nowacki is here this evening if you have any specific questions related to that. But that is all the information I have on this particular resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any questions before we introduce the actual resolution for consideration? Comments? All right, so I'm going to introduce the following resolution for consideration. Resolved, resolution authorizing appropriation of $1,018,000 for a road construction and reconstruction Phase 6 project, and authorizing the issuance of the town's general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $1,018,000 to finance the appropriation. May I have a motion to waive a reading of the entitled resolution, and that's full text be incorporated into the minutes of the meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Reed, second by Ms. Martin. Any discussion on the motion to waive? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And against? That motion carries 7-0. Is there any comment or discussion regarding the resolution?
No.
I'll call for a vote on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor and against? That motion carries 7-0. We will now ask for a motion to call for a town meeting to consider and act upon that resolution, subject to, of course, the contingent precedent approval of the Board of Finance.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mauer, second by Mr. Reed. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of calling for a town meeting? Motion carries 7-0. I'm going to just defer calling for a town meeting until the end so we can do it orderly.
Yes.
Moving on to the next appropriation and bond authorization. Mr. Kellogg is the Town Hall Campus Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the second item package that we are looking for your approval is a total of $200,000, including the projected issuance, bond issuance costs for what we're calling a Town Hall Campus Safety and Security Package. As you'll recall, during the budget process, there was a collection of issues that were presented. Some of them were very much related to the ongoing safety and security of the Town Hall and this campus. From a doors perspective, certainly all the doors in Town Hall would be ripe for consideration. We are only looking to address certain interior doors and the exterior doors to address ability to secure them. I don't know any other way to say it other than Town Hall is not as secure as it should be. The locks are old, the doors are old, and we have had issues simply being able to secure Town Hall. We also obviously want to be able to integrate with fire and access control systems so that we can, particularly for the exterior doors, have appropriate key card access and a camera, security cameras as well. Regarding the gutters, as you recall, Mr. Nowacki had educated us at the capital budget presentations that we have issues with our gutters where water is entering or will be entering soon the building, which is obviously not a condition we want to continue. And last but not least, there were some ADA issues and recommendations from KERMA in the library side of the campus related to parking and sidewalk. We have had claims in this regard, and we are certainly looking to mitigate those going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any questions or comments before we introduce this resolution? All right. So I will introduce the following.
Just for the record, Mr. Nowacki is here if there's any questions on any of these matters.
Any questions of Mr. Nowacki before I introduce the resolution? All right, let's introduce the following resolution. Resolution authorizing an appropriation of $200,000 for the Town Hall Campus Safety and Security Improvements Project, and authorizing the issuance of the town's general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $200,000 to finance the appropriation. We have before us a full copy of the actual resolution. However, may I have a motion to waive the reading of the entitled resolution and its full text be incorporated into the minutes of this meeting? Motion by Mr. Condon, second by Ms. Martin. Any discussion on the waiving of the reading? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. On the table on the floor is the actual resolution itself. Any comments or questions regarding it? Call for a vote on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor and against, that motion carries 7-0. I will now ask for a motion to call for a town meeting to consider and act upon this resolution. Motion by Mr. Condon, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Martin. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor and against, motion carries 7-0. I will defer the calling of the town meeting until we complete the review of all these resolutions. Moving on to the next item, which is the appropriation and bond authorization of $180,000 for the EMS facility project phase 1. Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you will recall, we have in the current year capital budget $1.5 million included in this fiscal year for this project, which, as you know, we have an EMS building committee that is actively engaged working on the project. They have gone through the process of putting out to bid architectural services and evaluating the cost for us to be able to go out to a full construction bid to give us a final real number. As you know, we had a prior EMS feasibility study which came up with cost estimates that were fairly solid, but to get a final number, we need to go out to full construction bid. So we're looking for a phase 1 allocation to encompass the cost that would allow us to go out to bid. The first being the cost of architectural services. Presuming that this entire package goes forward, I will be presenting the council a contract for an architect that was recommended by the committee. The portion of those costs directly related to being able to go out to bid is the $133,200. There are additional allowances that are estimated for various surveys, soil analysis, engineering, bidding expenses as well. And then we've also, because there is some estimation in that regard, we've added a healthy contingency on that, simply because if suddenly you need a second study on one of those things, it could be a significant amount. So the total being $180,000.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any questions or comments before we, Mr. Mauer?
Not on this. I just want to make sure, and we very well may have, but I want to make sure that we did. Did we do on the last one both a motion and second for the waiver as well? Did we do the motion and second for the passing of the resolution?
We did.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments? Any comments before we introduce this resolution?
Yes, but they needed.
All right. So I will introduce the following resolution. It's always nice to do these together, but it's like the joke's on me, right? All right. Resolution authorizing the appropriation of $180,000 for the EMS facility project phase 1 and authorizing the issuance of the town's general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $180,000 to finance the appropriation. You have before you the full printed version of the resolution. However, may I have a motion to waive a reading of the entitled resolution and its full text be incorporated into the minutes of the meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mauer, or second? Second by Mr. Rooney. Any discussion regarding the waiver? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, on the floor is the motion to adopt the resolution.
Mr. Chairman, if I
yes.
may. I think we're about to do it again. We have not,
Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? That was your question, right?
yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? Motion by Mr. Condon. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mauer. Discussion regarding the adoption of the resolution. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on the adoption of this resolution. Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Mauer, just to cover our bases, because I'm doing the motions and I'm doing too much up here. That's all your fault. I'm blaming all you guys for making me do all this. Let's go back to the previous consideration. May I have a motion to adopt the resolution entitled Appropriation and Bond Authorization of $200,000 for the Town Hall Campus Safety and Security Improvements Project, just to be clear. Motion by Mr. Rooney. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Martin. Discussion relative to the adoption. All right, seeing none, all those in favor? 7-0. Make me look good, Madam Clerk, please. Thank you. Moving on to the last of our resolutions, which is the appropriation and bond authorization of $918,000 for the town's 2018-2019 vehicle replacement plan and purchase of DPW trucks and equipment. Mr. Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this package, we've included various vehicle replacement and public works trucks and equipment. As you'll recall, our public work truck replacement program for our 6-wheel and 10-wheel dump trucks is an ongoing rotation. We did 2, as you recall, last year. This is for 2 more, one of each of the 6-wheel and 10-wheel. Again, this is to improve our safety, reliability, and efficiency, and again, reliability, particularly in winter storm response, to reduce breakdowns, and again, part of the long-term replacement plan. In the capital budget process, we also discussed the town vehicle replacement program. This encompasses several vehicles in town, one being a new vehicle for the EMS department for both administration and response. It is not only part of a efficiency for administration, but also will increase certain volunteer coverage as well. It's part of their plan, and that I know the EMS department has been working with the EMS Commission on to increase certain call response as well. We also have 9 vehicles identified in the budget process that are right for replacement. These vehicles are, in some cases, are rusting, rotting, extremely old. There are 4 vehicles that we can replace through internal reassignments, rotations from PD or elsewhere in town, but it would leave 5 that would be replaced with new. Many of those are pickup trucks and the like, so that is that portion of the bonding allocation being requested. And the last 3 are equipment for public works. One is a skid steer for the dump, which will dramatically increase their operational efficiencies. They currently have a really inefficient process that with the skid steer they can improve upon dramatically. Replacement of a rack body with a lift gate and a truck body replacement to prolong the existing life of the existing vehicle that otherwise would be one of those $200,000 to $250,000 replacements, which we can simply prolong existing equipment. Again, Mr. Nowak is here if you have any specific questions. I would just like to note, since we're kind of at the end, I just want to make note that with tonight, the total for all the projects is, sorry, wrong number here, hold on. The total for all is 2.32316, including the issuance costs. That is within our, if we were to go forward and bond the entire balance of everything in our capital plan this year, that would be in the 4.7 to 4.8 range. Again, if you consider that the most our appetite would be for this year, we are still, the point is that with bonding that is rolling off, this fiscal year, we are still in a stable rolling 5-year average.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any questions or comments, Mr.?
I have some. Being the liaison EMS Commission, and Chief Smith is here. This has taken on more criticality. Right now, we're down an ambulance, and it's supposed to go to DPW when we get the other one in January, but that's under serious repair constraints right now. It's definitely out of commission and looking for almost 16 grand worth of repair costs potentially, which the service doesn't have, which makes the need for the run car even greater. Right? As soon as we get that, at least they can have another vehicle to respond to calls. So this is desperately needed. I don't know what the Chief Smith wants to talk, but you know, it's pending. Also have another vehicle that's constantly down as well, but I'll leave him to talk to the service. But we need these vehicles desperately, the vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Condon. Chief?
Good evening, everybody. So the response vehicle, the administrative vehicle, we've been looking at for a long time now to try to put into place for several different reasons. The first being, one, an administrative vehicle. So when our administrator needs to go to meetings, even around town, right now she's taking a personal car, which means if that call comes in, she's in a personal car versus any type of response vehicle that's equipped that she could either go back to headquarters and meet up with a crew or respond to a scene. The other plan on the vehicle is also for volunteers to be able to utilize. So on a weekend, we rely on home responders a lot, as do what most communities like ours. They can actually have the vehicle to respond. It shortens response times either to the scene to pick up a vehicle. And then, as Mr. Condon said, 952, which is the one that's going to be rotated out this year when we get the new vehicle, has some major engine issues, and it can be significant to try to get it repaired. You know, currently I'm working with DPW, we're having those discussions, but getting a vehicle that at least gives us a response vehicle we could do for special events and do some coverage that way, because we're down to the 2 operational ambulances right now. And we've worked hard for this vehicle to keep it at minimal cost. What we're looking at is nothing expensive. We're getting basically the police package SUV, which is a scaled down Ford Explorer that's a lot less than any of the other SUVs you try to buy on the market, because I'm looking at what do I need just to operate. I don't need anything fancy. We've tried to keep it down to the bare minimum for a response vehicle, and the police package is perfect for us because, number one, it's built for that purpose. It's built for emergency services, and it doesn't have all the extra stuff that can go wrong as a base vehicle. So that's why I've been trying to move this forward, and we're also under a time constraint because Ford is discontinuing all the police models. They're taking them off. They're going to be retooling for something new that nobody's sure exactly what they're coming out with or when it's going to come out or the price point for these new vehicles. So there's a sort of deadline of this month to place an order, or else Ford won't be accepting any more orders for this type of vehicle, which either means we delay it longer or we end up getting something more expensive down the road whenever they come out with whatever their new package is for police vehicles.
Ms. Martin?
Will Ford still service this vehicle?
Ford, it's like an Explorer, so yes, they will still service it. Our mechanics can service it, but they're changing the platform. They're actually, even from the police side, they're getting rid of all the sedans. Ford is moving out of the sedan business, going to strictly SUVs. So you're going to see, for law enforcement, we're going to be seeing all sedans coming out. We're switching to a different manufacturer.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? No. All right. So,
thank you.
Mr. Kellogg, anything further?
No.
I'm going to introduce the following resolution entitled Resolution Authorizing an Appropriation of $918,000 for the town's 2018-2019 Vehicle Replacement Plan and the purchase of trucks and equipment for DPW, and authorizing the issuance of the town's general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $918,000 to finance the appropriation. You have before you a copy of the full printed resolution. May I have a motion to waive the reading of the entitled resolution and that its full text be incorporated into the minutes of the meeting?
Please read it.
Motion by Ms. Martin. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rooney. Any discussion on the motion to waive the reading? Seeing none, all those in favor? Against? Motion carries 7-0. May I have a motion to adopt the aforestated resolution?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mauer, is there a second? Second by Mr. Rooney. Is there any discussion regarding the adoption of this resolution? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor and against, motion carries 7-0. And may I have a motion to call for a town meeting to consider and act upon this resolution? Motion. Mr. Condon, thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Martin? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? That motion carries 7-0. So what I'm going to ask for is just a consensus now. My intention is to just have a vote, just to keep things tidy on a motion for, to actually call for the public hearing on September, it's Wednesday, September 26, 2018. We've checked with the registrars, and they are available, or at least can handle that evening. The question is regarding the time. What's the preferred time, Mr. Kelly? Do you have a suggestion?
I would suggest 7.
7 p.m. It is my intention to call for a one-town meeting and the agenda to incorporate all 4 of the resolutions.
One meeting, 4 votes, correct?
Right, one meeting, 4 votes. It'll be an agenda, and we'll list all those, so I will state that for the record in a moment. Is there any objection to that time?
Wednesday, the 26th, 7 p.m., correct?
Correct. Okay, so may I have a motion that contingent upon Board of Finance approval, a town meeting be warned and held on Wednesday, September 26, 2018, at 7:00 p.m. in the Monroe Town Council Chambers of the Monroe Town Hall to consider and act upon the following bond resolutions, and that the town clerk cause legal notice of such meeting to be posted and published in accordance with law. The agenda for that evening and the resolutions to be considered will be the 4 that were approved for adoption this evening. First, the appropriation and bond authorization of $1,018,000 for a road construction and reconstruction Phase 6 project. 2, appropriation and bond authorization of $200,000 for Town Hall campus safety and security improvements project. 3, the appropriation and bond authorization of $180,000 for the EMS facility project Phase 1. And 4, the appropriation and bond authorization of $918,000 for the town's 2018-2019 vehicle replacement plan and purchase of DPW trucks and equipment. I think that covers it all. May I have that motion? Motion by Mr. Condon, second, Mr. Mauer. Any discussion regarding this calling of the formal calling of the town meeting? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, motion carries 7-0. Consider the public warned of the town meeting. All right. The last item of business is item M on the amended agenda, which is the legal counsel retention regarding the opioid litigation. Before we present the motion, Mr. Keller, I don't know if you want to update us. This is a matter that we had considered at least one time previously. We did receive a presentation from one of the law firms who is heading up representing municipalities as plaintiffs in this litigation, and we were to consider whether or not to join that action. I think everybody's had enough time to do so. I believe it's back on the agenda. The reason why it's back on the agenda is because it's fairly becoming time sensitive. Those cases are moving forward, and it is appropriate for us to have to consider whether we want to be included or remain on the sidelines regarding this this litigation. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Kellogg, just for the introduction of new information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a ton of new information other than, yes, just to recap, we did discuss this, as you'll recall. There was a discussion in the executive session as to whether or not to basically hear the presentation and the information so that this council could determine if it's something they wish to pursue. The only update I'll have is, yes, one is that we would need to finalize that decision, and it is not uncommon for me to get inquiries from other firms or consultants in regards to our appetite in this regard, and advise that there are other communities that have joined on, etc. So in speaking with your chairman, Mr. Chairman, I asked that he consider putting this on the agenda so that we could discuss it further and I could receive some direction from council in this regard.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Does anybody have any comments, thoughts,
I do.
Mr. Condon?
I'll have Chief Smith add to it if I screw up. The state is now tracking, before we had nebulous numbers and how many opioid cases we had. Police came in and EMS came in and we made our best guesses in regards to how many were coming. Now it's mandated tracking, so that has begun already. And so, that is gonna be reported out, so we'll have much better numbers of how many cases we've had. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Condon. Anybody else? With that information, I think what I'm looking for is kind of some consensus as to, or someone can certainly present a motion to authorize the first selectman to enter into a formal legal agreement to proceed as call it a class member or a plaintiff in the
So
pending
motion.
litigation. Motion by Mr. O'Rourke to authorize the first selectman to execute any and all documents necessary to become a party to a plaintiff to the pending action that we were presented with the law firm that presented it, I would presume, right, Mr. O'Rourke?
Yes.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rooney. So the motion is before us, and can now discuss the merits of the motion and what the intentions of this council may be. Anybody want to go forward? Mr. Condon?
I think given the epidemic that happened in New Haven and the rise of these cases, I think it behooves us to kind of get on top of this. Initially, I was not for it. I didn't think we had good numbers. I didn't think we could get any kind of settlement if we did win something, but I've kind of changed my mind and thinking that maybe we should follow this. Now that we have better numbers, we'll be able to track our expenses. Narcan's not cheap, and we go through it rather quickly. So I think we should join into this.
Mr. O'Rourke?
Originally, when this came before us, I had some mixed emotions with regards to our participation in litigation. I guess on the size of the town and maybe the number of cases that were directly involved with us here in Monroe. Unfortunately, I have been touched by this crisis personally with the loss of a family member this summer. And from New York State, a small town, 19,000 people. So the parallels with regards to the population size, the demographic of the people involved, and yada, 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 obviously gave me pause to rethink my earlier leanings on this subject, and hence the reason why I made the motion to move forward on this evening.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. Reed?
Yeah, same as the other guys, something this evil deserves something as equally as, I would say, violent on the other side. This lawsuit or anything that could come out of it needs to be aggressive, needs to be equally as aggressive. This type of thing is also, I keep hearing, not just tonight, but in general when I walk around, everybody talks about Monroe, and this is a borderless issue. These things affect us, whether they're in Newtown, another town, south of us, north of us, whatever. People can be going through, committing these crimes, and they're stopped here. There's so many levels and layers to this thing, where I believe we have a moral obligation to join. It's not even other municipalities, it's just citizens of the state to fight this as equally as it is on the other side. So for me, it's a borderless activity, it's a borderless effort. It has nothing to do with the borders of our town. It's affecting us everywhere, and anything we can do within the legal parameters should be taken as far as they can go. So that's my view of this.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Mauer?
I agree. This is, I think that was well put about this being borderless. I also want to add that I don't think this is a financial decision either. Yes, we're going to be a very small part of this pie, but I don't think that's the purpose of going in on this. It's not just a showing of support for the members of our community who have been affected. It's a showing of support for anybody and everybody who's been affected by this. And joining in together, right thing to do for the people of Monroe and the people of Connecticut, and just people in general. So as a council member, I wholeheartedly support joining this action.
Anybody else, Mr. Young?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, about a year ago, being a liaison to the police department, I had many conversations with law enforcement about this. You know, there was one point where we had multiple overdoses, and I think it's safe to say that many of these individuals, the prescription medications are somewhat of a gateway to opiate abuse and addiction. So I think as a town, I think it's very important that we stand strongly behind any initiative to make a difference in that arena. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Martin?
Sure. I have nothing to say, and I totally support this. I think this is one of these, this is the no-brainer. If it hasn't affected you yesterday, it'll probably get you tomorrow. Nobody's immune from this, so I'm in full support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Condon?
I think we think that it doesn't affect us now, but we just signed off on investing in some emergency vehicles. They're the people responding to this. And if they're responding to one, they're responding to two, they're responding to three at the same time. It's getting ugly. I mean, the amount of three calls at the same time are escalating. So it does have immediate impact on us. We're investing in our infrastructure to deal with it, and this can only, it can only escalate on time given the way the market is and how healthcare is today. So I think it behooves us to do this.
Anybody else? Yeah, again, this is something that I considered as well. The consideration, I agree with what everybody said, and I think it's an obligation of council to have to consider this, and I want to thank the first selectman for bringing this to our attention. The issue I've been struggling with is, and I too have been, personally affected by this, and in my line of work, I've seen a lot of it on a regular basis. The thing that I've been struggling with is do we have the proper defendants here? Are we going after the right party? I mean, the lawsuits are against, Purdue Pharma, big pharmacy companies, presumably deep pockets, and it seems to be that, we're laying the blame on the manufacturer of these prescription medications, and I don't know, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I don't know whether or not that's the appropriate culpable party in whole or in part. And I think that's the key question for me is, as an attorney, I can appreciate the litigiousness of our society and the fact that when something goes wrong, we're always trying to find blame and point a finger and find a culpable party. And I think some scenarios are just not that simple. It's often a very tangled web. And it's hard to point a finger directly at somebody. And I think this is a good example of that. This epidemic, I don't think clearly falls on the shoulders of the big pharmacy companies. I think there are many aspects of it and many parties that are culpable and should be found culpable. And I hope that, as unfortunately as society continues to be affected by this, that we can start to untangle this very dangerous web that's been created. While I'm confident that the pharmacy companies are not solely to blame, I will support joining in this litigation with the hope that at the very least it helps to untangle the web and create some type of structure that can educate those companies, entities, individuals, departments, municipalities involved to prevent it from happening again in the future. So that's why I'm going to support it. I have to be honest, I very much struggled in the beginning because I don't like just, I feel like it's throwing a dart at an aimless dartboard, an invisible dartboard, and again, I'm happy that we're not understanding, our motivation is not money. Clearly that was made very prevalent in the presentation. What we can hope to come out of this is education and awareness and community awareness, and like I said, hopefully we can untangle the web and prevent it from happening with pharmaceuticals and other problem areas like this moving forward. So with that, I'll support this now. It's definitely a change of direction, but I think it was well discussed by council. I want to thank everybody for their participation. If there are no further comments or questions, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Kellogg, are you clear? I don't want to be descriptive about anything. We're fully authorizing you to, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the motion fully authorizes Mr. Kellogg to engage legal counsel to become what will be a plaintiff in the pending action. I do want to point out there are a number of actions pending, and there are a number of plaintiffs' law firms, and there are different sects of municipalities that have joined on with different law firms. We've only heard a presentation from one, and so this motion would be, it would only be appropriate to authorize the first selectman to engage that particular firm. So are we on the same page in that regard?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly, do you feel comfortable with that?
I'm fine with
that? Okay. Anything further? Okay. So with that being said, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, that motion carries 7-0. That concludes our new business. We have second public participation. Anybody like to participate in second public participation? All right, seeing none, I'll close second public participation. Is there a motion to adjourn? No. Motion by Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Condon. All those in favor? 7-0. Thank you very much. Roll call, all members of council, except for Mr. Reed, are present. He was kind enough to be able to phone in for the LNA meeting, but could not for town council. Mr. Kellogg is also present. Before we begin our regular calendar agenda this evening, we have a special moment that we generally have experienced annually, thankfully, to our wonderful volunteers in town. That's the Sprint for Monroe donation disbursement presentation. So without further ado.
Well, thank you for your kindness in putting us at the front of the agenda. So thank you for allowing us to come before you tonight. My name is Amy Permerac, and with me I have Dr. Paul Moyes and Fran Welch, and we're all members on the Sprint for Monroe Race Committee. We had a wonderful race this year. We had about 800 people at the 5K and almost 100 kids at our kids race. And even though this year's registrations were down over last year because of increased sponsorship and support from our local business community, we actually ended up with a total fundraising that was $6,000 more than last year. This year is actually our highest year to date in fundraising, and we raised $24,000. Wow. So we're very excited. And as you know, all of the proceeds for our race stay in the community. We donate them to local charities and organizations. We are a committee of 9, as you can see in your packet. We do have 9 members to our committee. Dr. Moyes and Fran Welch are here with me today. We also have Frank Bent, Ed Butler, Sue DeGeorge, Kevin Early, Helen Lazaro, and Mary Beth Zarifian are the other members of our committee. We met last week to decide on the recipients of our fundraising. Some of our recipients are year over year. We donate every year to the food pantry, to Project Warm, the police department, volunteer EMS. But some other organizations change in and out year to year based on need and whether they come and approach us or not. If it's a known need that we're aware of, we will look to that organization. So this year we have asked to donate our proceeds to $4,250 to the food pantry, $4,500 to Project Warmth, $1,500 to the Massac track team, $750 to the Massac color guard team, $500 to the Massac swim team, $500 to Monroe volunteer EMS, $700 to Parks and Rec, and that actually they did approach us with some needs, and that number was specific to those needs, some safety equipment for the for the Wolf Park pool. $300 to Colonial Sanitation, but what this is really for, it's not really a donation, it pays for waste receptacles at the rails to trails, so it's a nice thing, you know, all those little baggies that people have. Some of them actually do make their way into those trash bins now. The Friendship Fund, $1,000. We really talked about this one. This is our largest donation yet to the Friendship Fund. We've been seeing a lot of increased need and people using the Friendship Fund, so we really wanted to support them. Stephanie Fire Department, $500. Monroe Police, $500. We increased our donation to Adam Alcohol Drug Awareness Monroe. We understand that they are looking to purchase some new breathalyzers for activities at Massac High School, so we wanted to support that. And then new this year to us, the Monroe Playground Foundation. They came out and supported the race this year. We know that they are trying to raise a lot of money to refurbish the kids' creation at Wolf Park, so we wanted to support that with $1,500. Massac Robotics Team is another new organization for us to donate to this year. They also came out to the race this year. We're very supportive, brought a lot of volunteers. They even brought a drone to the race that we are still working with the footage from to use to showcase the race for next year. And then finally, the CMAC Foundation, Chase Michael Anthony Kowalski Sandy Hook Memorial Foundation. Those are the recipients to our kids race. A lot of money is donated straight to them through our race, and then the rest of it is through sponsorships and registrations. Are there any questions?
You
Yeah,
didn't have
just
Dee Dee in my picture there.
I'm sorry?
You didn't have Dee Dee's in my picture.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It's tough to make the cut of the postcard.
You probably
It
have
really
a
is.
little blurb, a little box.
Could you make a bigger
You're
post?
probably on Facebook though.
Just one
Mr. Conley.
Yeah,
question.
fine.
Yes.
You said 500 to police, but it said 1,000. Was that a correct?
Oh, did I? It's whatever's on, I'm sorry, I misread that. It is 1,000. It's whatever's on.
Thanks.
So,
Anybody else?
Wonderful
Great job.
Yeah,
Fabulous
phenomenal
Great.
job. Thank you so
Michelle.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jack.
you.
I'll pay for a bigger picture next time.
500 bucks.
So, I'm gonna use my discretion and just move forward to new business, item A, which is the 2018 Sprint for Monroe donations. Is there a motion to approve the donations as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mauer, is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. Is there any discussion regarding the donations? We had for the record, we had a presentation prior to the motion being presented by Ms. Primarak and members of her team, and it does specifically delineate the various donations. And without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to extend my extreme gratitude to the committee for all their hard work and for all the benefit that they're doing for our community and for all the benefit that they're going to now in turn provide to all these organizations. And I fully support their recommendations. And again, my deepest gratitude for what you're doing. Thank you.
Any further comments, Mr. Mauer?
Just to second the thanks and gratitude our selectmen just passed on. It's not only appreciated, I'm sure, by the council members, but also by all of the members of these organizations and all of the people they serve. So I'm sure they all would share in that sentiment. So thank you for everything you guys do every year.
Anybody else? Yeah, what's great about this race is, although I haven't been able to participate the last couple of years due to conflicting obligations, it's really become a statement event in the town of Monroe. So not only does it do a phenomenal job raising money for various organizations from a financial standpoint, but it's really exciting to hear about the race and it's upcoming, and it's really become a true signature event for the town of Monroe. So I think kudos to you guys for establishing that. So thank you very much. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, motion carries 8-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's nail biter. Bye.
We'll see you next year. Maybe a second.
And all those people needs to know.
It's not. Oh, I got you. Sorry. Tested me. All right. So where were we? Back to the consent calendar. Comments, objections to the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, I'll pass the consent calendar. There are communications A through L. Absent any objection, I'll ask that they be incorporated into the body of our minutes.
So moved.
Public participation. Would any members of the public wish to participate publicly? All right, not all at once. Okay, I'll close public participation.
Screening.
There are no appointments this evening. Action items, we have A is the Town Council Committee on Finance, Education, Health, and Public Safety. Mr. Rooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have not met.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Item B is the Town Council Committee on Planning and Zoning, Public Works, and Parks and Recreation Matters. Ms. LaPaz.
Yep, so starting with planning and zoning, there was a big discussion again about the Town Line Plaza. 2 proposed abutting lots consisting of 4 separate commercial buildings, a Noble gas station with retail convenience store, restaurant, drive-through service window, a standalone restaurant, and a multi-tenant commercial building, a bank with drive-through service window, general retail and personal services, and a standalone multi-tenant medical office building. And then there was a draft approval has been requested with the following conditions: DOT approval, Health Department approval, no audio or video systems on the gas pumps, 4 grade and setback waivers were issued. And the next thing was the Goodwill. They're talking about Goodwill, the store that's now been vacant for probably over a year. They're going to distinct vacant building into 2 tenant spaces, with 1 space seeking a charge of use from general retail to a liquor store. Next, they also wanted to just discuss about Victoria Drive, because we all have seen in the paper all kinds of comments against and for the new recycling with glass. So the P&Z had approval to be drafted with the following conditions: sound attenuation study and monitoring, signage to be installed on Victoria Drive to prohibit trucks from excessive brake noise. Trucks used in the business must be equipped with flashing lights instead of the noise-based backing alarms, because I understand it's a 24-hour-a-day business. So when those trucks back up, neighbors on Eastdale and Country Ridge are going to hear those trucks backing up. So now they're saying they'll have flashing lights instead. DEP permit to be submitted, further reduction in impervious surface. The roof won't be galvanized, it'll have a painted finish. And then they'll have evergreen trees planted to substitute for additional noise attenuation. Park and Rec went for 3 hours the other night. I'm just doing the highlights. The Kids Monroe Playground Foundation, they reviewed playground vendor decision process, vendor concept review, and naming rights signage. So for the vendor decision process, they established playground requirements to include community build, fitting it with overall feeling of a park, clean sightlines, handicap accessibility, tall structures, unstructured play. There are 3 vendors who've been trying to get this project: Leathers and Associates, GRC, and UdiPlay. And they all can do some of the work, but their decision has been to go with Leathers because it's the original builder of Kids Creation Playground and has a completely custom playground that met all established requirements. And then they went on to discuss how they're going to do it. It's going to be a 5-day build with 2 shifts per day, and that will build the playground. And I take no credit, but I was part of that group just slightly to build it. And when everybody works, you can get it done. And they're even going to have babysitters there. It's with the 5-day playground. And then they went on to discussing the food concession stand was good for this year. It was open at the pool and during character dinners and concerts. Discussion followed regarding food trucks at sporting games. And then they discussed scheduling for concerts for next year to reduce staging costs. The end of summer concert was well received, so it should be offered again next year. There were no issues with the new alcohol beverage waiver for picnics. And in terms of the playgrounds, they are restaining the bridge at Great Hollow Lake. It's been completed. And Tony Scott, the chair, suggested creating a list of all current maintenance activities that are not Park and Rec's function. So the meeting was from 7 to 9:45.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Moving on to item C, which is the Town Council Committee on Legislative and Administrative Matters. We did meet this evening. We discussed the one item of new business that is on our agenda this evening, which we'll discuss shortly, which is the reval contract with Vision Government Solutions. And we also discussed the other 3 contracts, all of which are on the consent calendar, which are the DPW truck acquisition, the user agreement for confirmation.com, and the administrative services agreement with Yale New Haven Health. That was really the germane contractual business. And then we had a brief but very interesting conversation on blight and the blight ordinance. And I think there was material agreement on the direction that LNA wants to go in with regards to crafting this ordinance. And it was discussed and agreed that at the next meeting, we will have those material terms really regarding the definition of blight to present and discuss more formally at the next LNA meeting. It was unanimously agreed that the citation procedure, the legal procedure, and the process by which the ordinance is issued would mirror the current ordinances we have for inland wetlands and zoning. So those will just be mirror images. And we also discussed in the presence of Mr. Feldman some incentives to addressing blight and rehabilitating blight that we found from some other communities that they use. And I think I'm speaking for Mr. Feldman, and that he thought that was a positive example to use and would support it as well. So that's where we are. And I anticipate this being on our council agenda, believe it or not, in the next month or so, just to have a more full conversation about blight. So start thinking about blight if you haven't already. Some of us maybe have been thinking about it for 5 years plus or more, but it's an interesting topic. I think we'll have a very kind of a heated conversation about it. I'm encouraged to see what the public comments are going to reveal when we get that far. Certainly necessary. Nothing will happen without those public comments at least once or twice or more. But I think you'll all find it very interesting, and I think your opinions on blight will change. You'll be like a seesaw back and forth as we present the various hypotheticals and options, because myself and Ms. Martin and Mr. Pellis dealt with this. Mr. Shadensky, Ms. Aguilar is now involved. Mr. Reed is involved. Mr. O'Rourke was involved. So everybody's had a little taste of blight, and we're gonna share that meal with everybody. So that's it for LNA. We'll move on to D, strategic planning. Mr. Condon.
We have had difficulty meeting. We have not met since last time.
Okay. E, EMS. Mr. Rooney.
We have not met, Mr. Chairman, but I can assure you that everything is going very smoothly.
Thank you. F, Fire Services Study Committee. Mr. Condon.
Waiting the final report still.
G, Mr. Selectman.
All right. If I could just give a backtrack one moment and just give an update on the fire. There is a final draft report that is out. I do anticipate asking the fire committee to review the full draft as soon as possible. The chairman of that committee is, I need to get him to schedule that meeting. I know he's currently out of town, but I will be doing that shortly, and the next step after that would be bringing that report to the council. So that is well underway. So on my update, just a few quick items. One, if you haven't heard, we are kicking off Restaurant Week again next month here in town. It'll be October 22nd through the 28th. EDC, once again, spearheading the effort as they did last year to promote our local businesses. This year, we are not charging restaurants to participate. So EDC has, within their budget, sufficient funds to be able to promote this adequately. We are already, I think, seeing a positive response from restaurants. Again, our goal is to increase commerce and promote the local businesses. So I think it's, I'm very optimistic that we're going to have a really robust restaurant week this year. The parking lot at Wolf Park, work began today. There's some regrading efforts that need to occur, particularly in the handicap area, and then the entire lot will be repaved. The overflow lot is still available, and that project is being done through a low-SIP grant. Beardsley Zoo is hosting a Monroe Day, as they've done in prior years. It'll be this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Discounted admission, and we will also have local departments and programs like our CERT team, our volunteer EMS will be there providing information as well. And last but not least, we are going to be having a community services fair on Friday, October 5th in the library, just for residents to come in and hear more information about town departments. It's also an opportunity, we will have a local pharmacy having flu shots available as well. And what is that?
Chamber golf outing.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I couldn't read the writing. So I was just asked to also, the Chamber of Commerce golf outing, is it October 2nd?
Yes.
Sure. I have to look at my calendar, so.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes.
7:30.
October 2nd. So, information available at the Chamber. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Kellogg.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Selectman, just to piggyback off of the Monroe Day at the zoo.
Yes.
I also was reading today, actually, that Monroe is having their Monroe Quasi Day. So for those that attend the meeting or read our minutes, I figured put that out as well for those people. That October 6th and 7th, I believe it is, for $5 with a Monroe ID, an all-day ride pass for Quasi.
Monroe Quasi Days.
Yeah, apparently.
Days,
right.
yes.
6 and 7, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Maury.
Thank you.
We have no unfinished business this evening. We've completed new business item A, which leads us to item B, which is the Vision Government Solutions contract for property tax revaluation. Ms. LaPellis,
Yep.
motion?
I will introduce the following resolution regarding Vision Government Solutions Incorporated revaluation contract, and move for its adoption. Resolved that Kenneth M. Kellogg, First Selectman of the Town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the Town of Monroe the contract for reappraisal and revaluation of taxable real and exempt property located within the corporate limits of Monroe, Connecticut, and any associated documents by and between Vision Government Solutions Incorporated for revaluation services effective as of the October 1st, 2019 grand list.
Motion by Ms. LaPellis, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mauer. Just to commence discussion, I'll note for the record that we do have an opinion, a letter from our town attorney as part of our package, and that LNA did discuss this in the presence of Mr. Kellogg and Mr. Feldman and approved it for town council's consideration 3-0. With that, I'll turn the floor to you, over to you, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first I want to thank Mr. Feldman and Mr. Hayden, who were very involved in crafting the agreement. A lot of this agreement, the bulk of this agreement of which was incorporated in the RFP package that was sent out. As you know, the reval is something required under state statute. We are required this year to do what's considered a full reval. So it's a large undertaking. The assessor went through the formal RFP process. There were two proposals that were received, and this Vision was determined to be the recommended vendor, and we think that they are obviously going to provide comprehensive services that we require for this. Vision is who we are currently, the integration of our GIS and the assessor's database currently right now is through Vision, so it's consistent with it. It's basically the incumbent platform, if you will. And certainly if you want any other details, Mr. Feldman is here as well. If you have any questions for him, I'd be happy to entertain any other questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Mr. Condon?
How does this fee relate to their last fee?
Excuse me?
How does this fee, the $284,300, how does it relate to the last charge they had?
So the last reval we did was a statistical, which was significantly cheaper than doing a full inspection. 10 years ago, I'm not sure exactly what the contract was. I actually believe the cost of these full inspection revals have come down a bit, and the proposal that we received was right in line with what I had been expecting.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
What was the total cost? I'm sorry.
284,300, page
It
2.
would actually be, if you added with, there's some additional mailers and things, it probably would be 300.
300-ish.
About 300 even to account for data mailers and pictures. Is that correct?
Correct. And the pictures are in the base cost, and the data mailers are an add-on, and it's tough to determine until we get through part of the inspection process how many we'll need. I estimated a little bit on the high side.
Mr. Monroe?
Gathering from your last statement, it's every 10 years we need to do a full eval?
Yes.
And how often do we have to do the statistical one?
So it's a 5-year cycle.
But every other time
Every
is
other,
statistical,
right.
okay.
You go statistical, full statistical.
Yes.
Mr. O'Rourke?
What's the, I guess it's a difficult question to answer, but what's the gut telling you with regards to the revow? Plus or minus?
We're still recording, right?
That's not a question that
That's
I'm
what we're
really
inventing.
all that comfortable answering at this time, but I think indicators are that the housing market has been relatively stable and then a slow and steady increase. However, there's still some time in between now and the sales that we'll be using to.
But 10 years ago, we were going off of what, 2009?
Yeah, so the initial revow was scheduled for 2008.
Right.
And obviously that was a very
So-
difficult time, and the prior one was 2009.
So 2000, at the time, 2009, between then and now, I think the values were still falling back past 2009.
Well, our last revow was 2014.
Okay.
So we were kind of, things were pretty slow and steady around that time, and, I hate to make projections until, we actually get to the data value.
Anybody else?
Just
Ms. Martin?
Mr. Kellogg, you're completely confident in both, that both of you are, in this, having been through the one 10 years ago, which was a bit of a disaster. You feel,
I was not, I was certainly a recipient of the issues 10 years ago, but I was neither on council nor obviously for selectmen, so.
right.
I
And
don't, I'm
I
not
was
aware.
not insinuating that you
No, I
were.
know. No, I know. So, I certainly, we had a long conversation about the issues that occurred last time, and then we're certainly looking to avoid that. Quite frankly, one of the reasons why we did not select the other vendor were some concerns relative to exactly that issue.
Okay, good.
So we are attempting to, I think, Mr. Feldman certainly incorporated best practices in what he proposed for the RFP, which was looked at by Mr. Hayden, so I'm confident they've addressed those issues. I mean, one of the other, well, that's more than the technical side. I mean, obviously, another component of this is making sure we're clearly communicating with residents in terms of the process, and that is something that I must credit Mr. Feldman. He anticipated I would want before I even asked, and we're, that will be incorporated into the process as well. So there's clarity and communication on how this is going to work.
So you're as confident as you possibly could be at this point?
Based on the information I have, absolutely.
Good to hear, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, that motion carries 8-0. That's all the business we have for this evening. Second, public participation. Seeing nobody, I will close second public participation. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Pellis, second.
I'll
Second by
second it.
Mr. Condon.
Mrs. Aguilar seconded.
Mr. Condon seconded
take
it.
your vote.
And all those in favor?
I try to get it.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.